This is Cascades Park, located in Tallahassee, Florida. Around 50 years ago, this area was the neighborhood of Smokey Hollow, which was home to an amicable, peaceful community. Smokey Hollow thrived until the early 1960s, when the residents of the neighborhood were unable to take a stand against urban renewal, a detrimental government policy that pushed the residents out of their homes. Residents first started referring to the area as Smokey Hollow in the early 20th century. Ever since Smokey Hollow became a distinct entity, it has been characterized as dangerous. The local newspapers seem to only report on the negative events that occurred in Smokey Hollow, warping the public opinion of the neighborhood. Over time, the words Smokey Hollow became synonymous for slum. Much of this characterization was probably based off of racist stereotypes, given that Smokey Hollow was a predominantly African American neighborhood. About 10% of Tallahassee's African American population lived in Smokey Hollow. Some people in Smokey Hollow owned businesses, and for this reason, Smokey Hollow was considered a middle-class African American neighborhood. While many people think of the middle class as fairly well off, during this time, the African American middle class was not. The residents of Smokey Hollow maintained their community as well as they could, given the incomes they had, but that meant that their homes were often not very well maintained. Something that contributed to this was the fact that most of the residents of Smokey Hollow were renters, and their landlords were not concerned about maintaining the property.
It was substandard. It was not living conditions that was conducive to health.
Despite the difficult living conditions that most residents of Smokey Hollow experienced, the community thrived. There was a strong bond between the residents of Smokey Hollow, and they all looked out for each other.
No matter whose child you were able to be taken care of. Families loved each other, and cared for each other in so many different ways.
This kind of support was what kept the community together. This bond was necessary at a time when racial discrimination ran rampant in the South. Nationwide, Congress had just passed the Housing Act of 1949, which brought about the concept of urban renewal. This act gave local public agencies financial assistance in the elimination and prevention of slums through the planning and undertaking of urban renewal projects. Urban renewal projects allowed the government to evict residents of the targeted neighborhood and seize their property in the name of slum removal. In 1954, another housing act was passed that popularized the phrase urban renewal. In the same year, the Berman v. Parker case was heard by the Supreme Court, and they decided to uphold the validity of urban renewal and allow the property to be taken for private use through the powers of eminent domain. While many states utilized the federal urban renewal acts to remove slums in their cities, Florida chose not to.
In Florida, they were very hesitant in the 1950s to take any money from the federal government. They argued that was akin to communism. It's in the midst of those civil rights struggles, so they don't want the federal government coming in and telling them what to do because that might lead to integration.
Even though Florida did not want to use the federal urban renewal money, that didn't stop them from dismantling neighborhoods all over the state. Smokey Hollow was one of those neighborhoods. Smokey Hollow was a good choice for urban renewal for many reasons. For one, it was an ideal location for urban renewal because its boundaries were easy to define. It was located in a valley and had a railroad track along one side of the neighborhood. The land on which Smokey Hollow was situated was also desirable because it was close to the Capitol, which made it a convenient location for state buildings. These are reasons that logically make Smokey Hollow a good candidate for urban renewal, but this is not the end of the story.
They were tearing down his house because San Francisco is engaging, as most northern cities now are engaged, in something called urban renewal, which means moving the Negroes out. It means Negro removal. That is what it means. And the federal government is an accomplice to this fact.
Urban renewal disproportionately targeted minority neighborhoods across the United States. Smokey Hollow was a middle-class African-American neighborhood with many flourishing businesses. The fact that these businesses were run by African Americans might have felt threatening to white business owners. In addition, African American homeowners received significantly less compensation for their property than white homeowners did. Records of the state purchased properties show that on average the state paid white homeowners $21,189 more than African American homeowners.
In our case, the property was taken for a state structure or parking. So it appears that sometimes it seems to be very convenient for development to occur in some minority areas.
African Americans faced many voting restrictions prior to 1965 when the Voting Rights Act was passed.
This is all pre-1965 Voting Rights Act. There are a few African Americans who are voting in the city of Tallahassee, but by and large, they're mostly disenfranchised. So without the right to vote, the city did not have to listen to their voices in any shape or form.
The residents of Smokey Hollow were unable to stand up for themselves and their community by voting against the bill. Once the bill had been passed, health inspectors came to Smokey Hollow to determine if Smokey Hollow was a slum or not. After this investigation, the inspectors agreed that Smokey Hollow did have substandard living conditions for this time.
So it's undeniable that the housing itself, much of it had been left by the landlords to deteriorate. And at the same time, they'd never put into place the kinds of things you'd want to see in housing today. So they weren't legally obligated to do it. They thought, well, maybe the city or the state is going to develop this land, so we're not going to improve the housing stock.
Like Kozlow said, renters in Smokey Hollow never got a chance to fix the problems. In this way, they were never able to take a stand against the government's power to save their community. Taking a stand against urban renewal was difficult, but there were white people who managed to. While white people often felt safe taking a stand against urban renewal, African Americans were hesitant because their community was already being targeted. At that point in time, the residents of Smokey Hollow were afraid to stand up for their community, given that they were already faced with a lot of oppression. There was nothing the residents of Smokey Hollow could have done to take a stand for their neighborhood. Since they couldn't vote, they weren't given a chance to fix their facilities, and they were too afraid to take a stand in court. Their neighborhood was going to be destroyed, and they couldn't do anything to stop it.
You were dissolving a community where people were a bond, and that bond is now broken, destroyed to some degree.
After the neighborhood was dismantled, the state put in the Department of Transportation and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. The rest of what used to be Smokey Hollow became a parking lot for the next 50 years, until Cascades Park was opened. The John G. Riley House was established in 1996 to commemorate the life of John G. Riley in Smokey Hollow. In the autumn of 2015, the Smokey Hollow commemoration was opened on the north end of Cascades Park. It commemorates the vibrant community of Smokey Hollow with 3 spirit houses and a community garden. While urban renewal occurs less frequently today, it is still an issue in our society. Many political leaders still believe that urban renewal is the way to fix slums, even though it is widely understood as a racist policy that displaces African American communities.
Discuss an issue that means so much to me. That's the issue of urban renewal, something you don't hear very much about, and the rebuilding of our inner cities.
History often repeats itself. It's imperative that we learn from our past mistakes so that the government never again takes advantage of minority communities. Smokey Hollow was a tight-knit community torn apart by urban renewal. It is a prime example of the powerlessness of the African American community and the era of segregation, and of the damage that urban renewal can do.
You can see with the economy, the way things are going now, what impacted me is coming back to impact others. And so it goes around. It may take years, but until we understand that we are our brother's keepers, no matter who we are, and that we should love all our children and treat them accordingly, no matter who we are, then we'll both ever get beyond this system of racism.